Hi, and welcome to Heart Healthy Leadership. We're your hosts, Greg and Angela Frost. And together, we love getting to come alongside leaders and see them grow more authentically into who God has designed them to be. For more information, please visit our website at thewellexchange.com. So actually, I wanted to start with a simple question. I know we probably should do an introduction. This is Jake Hamilton.
Yes.
Jake,
Hello.
you know, it's been fun to get to watch some of your content and get to know you a little bit that way. We got to watch some of the Finger of God movies and that kind of stuff in the past.
Oh, come on.
That was neat. And then I really loved your content lately because it's been very heart focused, and so our podcast is called Heart Healthy Leadership, which is like it's such a crucial thing. We find we work with a lot of business owners at the Well Exchange, and so what we do is we coach their hearts in the process. And so what I've loved watching you do is you're speaking from a really vulnerable, honest place of like this is the cost of trying to be super productive or being productive in the world sense, and then what does this actually look like to be productive in a kingdom sense and to be aligned with like what God has put in your heart and aligned with the Father's heart in your life, and then out of that ministry and business and all that stuff flows. And so that was the main reason why we wanted to connect with you. But before we get into any of that stuff, I wanted to ask you a really simple question. If you had a free day, what would you do with your time? Like you have a couple grand burning a hole in your pocket in a free day. What are you gonna do?
At this point, because our kids are the age they are, I would for sure take my kids to Disneyland. They're back into it again. We had season passes for like a decade or like 12 years when we lived in Southern California. And so we went like 4 or 5 times a week. Like we'd pick the kids up from school, go to Disneyland, hang out and have dinner there. And my kids literally, like, they might be the only children on earth that were like crying, "Not Disneyland again!" And so they're back like older now. They've been removed from it for, a decade. And so if I had the money, if I just had a couple grand and I had a free day, I would grab the family up and just no friends, no nothing, just the family, because the kids are now at the age where it's like they're not going to be around a ton and they're going to build families of their own. And so we want to soak up every single second we can with our kids. So I would do something. That seems like the easiest because we could drive there, So like we're still 9 hours away, but we could get there. And so that's probably what we'd spend the day doing.
Man, that's awesome. And so when you're at Disneyland, you're there with the kids. What are you guys experiencing? What rides are you going to? Like what? You've been there.
I haven't been, so I don't even know.
Yeah. Oh, so Geneva, I would for sure want to go on Pirates of the Caribbean. So that'd be easy.
Like a water ride or?
Yeah, so it's like an old ride. So just context, I am a super huge Disney dork. I love the history of it. I love all the stuff. I interviewed there when I was 17 years old. That's what I thought I was going to do. I started my first business doing large scale murals and design and a bunch of other stuff with art when I was 15 out of my parents' garage. And so that's how I actually ended up paying for my wife's wedding ring, funded ministry for years. But at 17, a guy from inside of Disney church friend of a friend, he got my portfolio of the art that I had been doing, like drawings, design, all this stuff. And he's like, "I'd love to interview you." So I came and I went and had an interview with them when I was 17. So that was my dream job. Like I was going to go to Cal Arts. I was going to be an artist for Disney. I was going to design for the parks. Like that was like my mentality when I was a teenager. That's what I thought I was going to do. So when I go, I'm still looking through the lens of a super dorky Disney guy who loves the entirety of it. There has been plenty of tears from Jake Hamilton shed just hanging out at Disneyland, watching people and watching families. Like I would go and sit by myself tons of times at Disneyland and just draw and just like meet people and see families. The original dream of Disney has always been like even a lot of the motivating factor of what we're doing now, where a dad is sitting on a park bench watching his daughters and saying there is some place that needs to be created where we can be together and enjoy one another as a family. And I'm like, that original intent for me was like, that is what I want to live my life for. So I think there's all that nostalgia and the park and the family stuff that's all kind of wrapped in there for me.
Well, I love that.
That's beautiful.
And so you've you're saying that's still your heart. So tell us a little bit more about that. You bridged into a different world that you were doing. I know you were doing worship and music for a long time, and bridged over into what you're doing now. And would love to hear a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, the very short version is, I mean, you could do like the 6-hour version, which is some of that's available on the YouTubes, you know, you can go and watch some of that stuff. But the short version is I've been in ministry, my wife and I have been in ministry since we were 20 years old, 19 years old. And so we have, you know, over a couple decades under our belts of ministry life that led into, you know, into leading worship globally with Jesus culture, which was tons of time gone. We have young kids, all of that stuff is happening. And I always say that when you're in ministry and you're busy, or you're a workaholic, nobody holds you accountable. They just actually applaud you. And so I was running over my family. No addiction, no pornography, no adultery, there's nothing. There was nothing except for a workaholic dad whose work was ministry. And that came to a head in 2010, playing the largest event I'd ever played. And it was beautiful, like amazing. I felt like this was like the answer to what I was created to do. This is what God told me I would do. And my marriage at the same time is falling apart. And we met the next morning after this huge event at Allstate Arena in Chicago. We meet up the next morning with like a dad, and the dad looks at my wife and is like, you know, she didn't have a wife or have a dad. And so he asked her, you know, how are you doing? And she just starts sobbing. And that leads to hours and hours of conversation that transformed our entire lives. Like it changed absolutely everything for us, like where I was being called out and being held accountable for even just my selfish behavior, like how much of ego is involved in a lot of that world that nobody ever addresses. And I just felt like I need to listen to this. And fast forward, we go back out onto the road as a family, which was super costly, but it was the decision we made to be like, hey, let's at least try to make this work. If not, I'll get a job at a bank. We'll figure out whatever we got to do at this point, because I don't care. And because I'm going to make this work as a family. And so that led us to traveling a little bit, still doing music. But behind the scenes in all the green rooms, people are always asking like, hey, how are you guys doing? You know, it's like green room conversation. Like, how are you guys doing? And we're like, totally open books. Like, we don't hide anything in our family. We don't hide anything with people. We're like, it's a train wreck. Like, literally, she was going to leave me. It was crazy. I played this thing and then she was going to leave me. And it was like, man, I'm a selfish, you know, a-hole. Like, the whole thing was just like, it's crazy, you know? And so it was like a total, like, hey, we're just going to be real. Yeah. And the crazy part was in every green room, every couple, every marriage, from the high, big, gigantic places to really small, they all said like, hey, can we talk to you? Well, first of all, they were like, that's a lot of information. Second of all, they were like, they said, can we talk to you afterwards? We're in the same place. Yeah. You know, everyone. I'm not talking like, oh, there was a lot. Like, no, there's nobody behind the scenes was talking about this. They were actually trying to hide it. Keep it covered. Now we're seeing a lot of the really horrible stuff coming out now, but that led us to doing what we called One Flesh for a while, ministering to marriages, and then that led eventually through a conversation with another dad, Alan Hood, who was like he was just amazing, and sat us down and was like, if you really want to save marriages, Jake, you got to go get men. Yep. And that was 10 years ago. And so we've been on a journey of like one man equals one marriage, which equals one family, which equals one generational line transformed. If I can get the man, I can change the whole family line. Because even Newsweek did an article years and years ago now, I mean, it must be 10, 15 years ago, did an article, and they said, they did a study on divorce and marriage, and they said at the end of the day, the end of the article said that 80 to 85% of marriages will course correct if the man simply decides not to leave. Yeah. And it's like, if the man simply just grounds himself, that the marriage will eventually course correct. That's no spirituality. That's leaving out the faith component, the therapy component, the communication, conflict resolution stuff, all that gone. If a man simply in his heart says, I'm not moving, we're going to work this out. And so that is the journey that we've been on. I mean, there's a very short version, but it was a lot for us to go like, hey, this is what we want to target with the remainder of our days on earth. Not just like, hey, this is a good ministry idea, or hey, this is be kind of cool. It's like, no, we're going to give the rest of our lives to this.
Yeah. I love that, because I think we've been seeing, especially with business, because our clients are mostly, and our network is business owners, it's just the same conversation. Like the church and business owners are very similar in their workaholism and sacrificing. Yeah. It just seems more notable because you're doing it for God in ministry, right? But it's the same tensions, same conversations. And so I'm curious, what was your journey like to because I feel like you went from like masking it and just moving it forward into a more honest place of like, I actually have to confront these things. So part of the question is, how did you find God responding to you as you got more and more honest? And then what was the hardest thing as a workaholic to confront as God was leading you into a more honest place?
Yeah, I mean, number one, if you are hitting the nail right on the head. Honesty is the beginning of transformation. You will only see transformation to the degree to which you can be honest. That's it. And so that kind of is the answer to both questions, because as I was more and more honest, I could be more and more connected to my wife and to my family. So the more and more I could be vulnerable, the more and more we could be intimate, the more and more that we could know each other. And you can only be connected, again, to the degree you're going to be honest and the degree you're going to be vulnerable. So loads and loads of men and women in their marriages, business and otherwise, they all want to be connected. I've never met a man, like no man has ever showed up to our thing and is like, man, I really feel like I'm trashing my marriage and it's amazing. I feel great about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, wow, I am so disconnected from my kids and I feel like this is the way it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? It's like, no man is doing that. Every man knows where they're stumbling. They just have no tools to move the ball down the field. They have no ability to, how do I course correct this without train wrecking everything in my life? And the beginning of that, the foundation of it is honesty and vulnerability. And so when I started engaging with the fact that I'm like, oh, dude, this really is, I am doing this for me. Yeah. For God, for, in business, for the family and, for legacy. And I'm like, no, this is about me. Like if this was really about God, or if this was really about my family, if this was really about legacy, I would be doing this completely different. That's just the reality of being honest. And I think as I got closer and connected to my wife, and the degree to which I was able to be honest, I could start dealing with the workaholism, because I knew the workaholism was stemming from belief systems that haven't been dealt with. And we talk about this in the fight all the time, that behaviors are a manifestation of your belief system. Like very, very simple, right? So beliefs determine values, values determine behavior. And so for us, I'm not interested in your porn addiction. I'm not interested in the workaholism. I'm interested in the root system, the belief system, the mindset, the patterns of thought that are getting you to these behaviors. And if we can deal with the belief system, then we can deal with the workaholism. And that for me was a big step. Like I was still looking for approval. I'm still looking for people to tell Jake he's good. Jake, you're good. You are godly. You are such a great Christian. Whatever you're such a good business person. Whatever the language is, that is where it started to fracture, because my belief system was still looking for that. I was still needing that. And the truth is, this is the crazier part, the more that you function in authenticity, the more that those deep-rooted fears start to manifest. Because the more I'm authentic, the more the thing that I need, I don't get. From the people, often, I think I need it from the most. And then I have to decide who I really am. Because the more authentic I am, especially in church world, the more authentic I am, the more it's like, well, that's not really worship. Well, is that really good theology? We can go down the lineage, the litany of things, Yes. But all of a sudden, if you're authentic, you're vulnerable, those things will start to fracture off your life really, really quick. Like God answers that real fast, And so that to me was the transformation. It was like, workaholism is slowly being torn off the more and more I'm just authentically me. Yeah. Because I will literally end up, by nature, I'll end up with the life I actually want. Because I'm living who I'm actually meant to be.
Yeah.
I love that. So what we call that generally is original design, like who's God originally designed you to be and living from that place. But back to honesty, one of the frameworks that we use is we call the honest place, the more honest place, and the most honest place. And, and so we use the analogy, and I often give this example in my life where I used to be a part of a team with someone where we had an unhealthy working relationship. It didn't work good. And so
that is the nicest version of that. We kind of rubbed each other the wrong way.
Oh, buckle up. I'll get there. So we had... It was awkward.
But how would you
I'm trying to be nice.
Right. This is what it was, though. Is like you're trying to be cordial, but like we hated each other. Like if we're being honest. So if I was being honest, I'd say if I could never at this time, right? If I could be honest in this situation, I would say if I could never work with this person again, I'd probably be happy. If I was being more honest in that situation, I would say if I never knew this person existed, I would probably be happy. But if the most honest place for me in that time, where my heart was at, is I understood the scripture where Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, if you're angry with your brother, you've committed murder in your heart," because I had let offense and anger settle so deep that if I could have killed him at that time and got away with it scot-free, I probably would have done it, because of that deep-rooted place, exactly the root system you were talking about. So for you, in the process of identifying the stuff in your own heart, the deep roots in your own heart, did you have community talking to you? Was it a self-journey with the Lord? Probably a combination of both. Would you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my wife's amazing. She just is. You marry what you need.
Yeah.
I'll just say it I'll say it in two ways. Number one, you marry your triggers, or to be more specific, you marry your shadow. So I marry the parts of me that I still need to have healed, that will point them out for me the rest of my life, which is why it's so deeply triggering. But it's not the enemy. That actually is the way God designs it. Because marriage is the place that's supposed to make you holy, not happy. So I had to work this, and holy, just for our framework, is we're talking about wholeness. We're not talking about perfection or idealism. We're not talking about that. We're talking about wholeness, integration. So if I'm going to fully become who I was meant to become, I actually need my wife to speak into the most difficult places of my life. And I need her voice to have resonance there. Like I can't just receive it. I need it to resonate and reverberate in the deepest, most painful parts of who I am and who I was meant to be. Because there's obviously a disconnect. That's where anxiety and stress and all that stuff come from, right? Like they come from the separation. Anxiety is easy to identify. It's just the gap between who you are and who you were meant to be. You know that gap is there, and anxiety is manifest the more you see the person you're supposed to be, and the more you realize where you are, that anxiety rises and rises. That's why it's circumstantial, situational, all those things. And I felt that as we began this journey together with my wife, where I was like, I can see what's possible. And then the anger starts to rise up because anxiety and fear, and I'm like stressed out because there's the gap of like, oh my God, I have built an entire life that I don't want to live. And it's not you can blame your pastor and your mommy and your daddy, and you can blame everybody you want. It's your fault. You did this to you. And I had to look in the mirror and go, I did this to me. So that was like the self-journey honesty part. I had to recognize I did this to me. And it was fulfilling needs that I had at the time that I don't have anymore, or I don't want to have anymore. Then my connection with my wife, where she's like, here's how I've experienced you. So now all of a sudden, it's not just the self journey, it's the I've experienced you this way. And I'm going, that is not what I'm trying to offer. That's not even what I thought I was offering. That's what's so crazy and difficult about these situations, because it's not even like, as a man, that's what I was trying to give my wife. But I have to be honest again, that's what she was receiving. So some part of me was offering that to her, and I have to understand how. Now, then I got a therapist. That was super helpful. That is like, when I learned basic attachment theory, which I know is like a buzzword now, but this is 15 years ago. I'm learning like, oh my God, I'm not loving the way that I want to love, or receiving love the way that I want to receive. I'm doing it based on how I learned. Oh my God, stop everything, throw it all away. I'm like, it blew my mind. I was like, why is nobody telling us this? And then that led to a tribe of men. Like really, what happened was we ended up starting what we call now The Fight. We started in my garage with 8 guys. And it was essentially Dan Allender's story work every single week. Like 2 men shared a story, walked through like essentially, what narrative trauma therapy, we just call it story work. Some people call it story work. I'm like, I just want to walk through stories that have defined my belief systems so that I can get to how those belief systems have determined our behavior. And we did this with 8 dudes in a room. And I mean, I don't know if it's super offensive to say, but it's like we're sitting around, we got a bottle of whiskey, and we shared that on a weekly basis. And because there's 8 guys, so you're getting 2 ounces or something, 2.5 ounces. But you're like, but we'd buy like really nice stuff, because what we did, what was cool about it, and I don't really share this very often, so there's here we go. But it was like, what we did was, I was like, the story of the history of the distilleries were usually based around men and families.
Yes.
So we'd tell that story first, and then I'd start to go, because when you start getting into older Scotch or things like that, you're talking about a 20-year journey, a 15-year journey, a 12-year journey. And I was like, I started connecting it to, in this circle of men, can we connect a 12-year journey to what we're doing right now? Like, where do we want to be in 16 years?
Wow.
Like, what kind of place do we want to sit and become what we were meant to become for 16 years, 20 years, 21 years, 25 years? Like, what does that look like for us? And then we connect that to the story. So that's why we did it, because it was all based around this story. And men, for like now, we've like, that started the fight. Like, that started what we're doing. Because I was like, if this works in my garage, I was like, this has to work out there for businessmen and for men who are just like out there grinding on a regular basis and have never taken the time to do this kind of care, for themselves in a tribe of men who aren't like, I've said this a million times, but I'm like, I'm not interested in accountability groups. Like, at the end of the day, like, if you're still going to the same accountability group for 6 months, you're not in an accountability group, you're in an enabling group. That's what you're in. You're just in a group of enablers where you come in every week to share the exact same thing, to purge yourself of guilt, which is just going to build up again until you purge again. This is nothing new, but at the end of the day, like, that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And so, I mean, we need practical tools, and those practical tools, like you asked at the very beginning of this very long-winded answer, is like came out of us doing self-discovery with our marriage and with a small group of men in a tribe in my garage. That was how it started.
Well, being known in community, like, that's very foundational to a lot of the stuff that we do and believe.
How do we say it's everyone's greatest desire and greatest fear is to be known at that depth.
Well, and we've built community around that as well with other couples and people, like actually just being known in your story. Just when you're simply known, it's so funny. We've walked through this with like people who are elders of churches for like 30 years and ministry and all that kind of stuff, and they do it. It is the most scared they ever are, all the time.
Sharing their stories.
It's terrifying, because it's the difference between transparency and vulnerability. I can be transparent with you, and it's like, I can be transparent right now, and we're behind a computer screen. I often say it's like, you're getting naked behind a pane of glass. You can't touch my wounds or anything. It's like, look at me. This is me, transparency. I'm safe. But vulnerability is like, you're getting naked, and you're just naked. It's Jesus with honest touching his hands, right? And like, look at the wounds. That's so hard, but it is, like we said, it's the greatest desire of most every person in this world. It's actually what we're called to do. When Jesus said, so you do all these amazing things and listen them out, like the miracles and casting out demons and healings. But depart from me, evildoer, for I never knew you. So just being known by God and by people, it's amazing to see the fruit of it in your life, because it's like you had this trajectory of world success and you were doing all the stuff that you admitted to now is like a selfishness, right? But now the fulfillment of your life is to step into helping other men be known, and so tell us a little bit about the fruit of that, because that's really fun to hear.
Can I add to that? Can we do a sorry, can I add to it?
No, please.
I want to do a comparison, because I feel like for the men, the business owners that we meet with, and the men, it's like they don't even know how to identify the cost of workaholism, right? Like, you don't see the actual cost until 20, 30 years down the road, and you're wondering, where did I go wrong? So as someone who's walked through this journey, can you just identify the cost of the workaholism and how it presents itself? And then now I would say the fruit on the other side of, like, now I've been walking in honesty and in community, and my internal world and my heart are aligned and I'm abiding. Here's the fruit, and just do a contrast, a comparison, so that people can understand the difference.
Yeah, and I'll start it with that first part, which is it was crazy because my first therapy experience, I'm pouring out my guts to this person, and they're like, "Can I just stop you right there?" And I was like, "Yep." And they're like, "Do you know the difference between vulnerability and telling on yourself?" And I was like, "I guess I do not." And they were like, "When you're telling on yourself, you're giving me all the right information, but it's from your perspective. If you're vulnerable, and it's so that you can control the way that I perceive you. Vulnerability is, I give you all the information and you let me make my own decision."
Wow.
And I was like, that was what I needed. Because I would. In ministry, it's like you're telling on yourself. Guys, I did this thing, and then I wrap it in a bow. And now it's got like a nice preacher bow on it, and it makes me look good. Look how humble I am. Look how I didn't just give you the information and then turn off the faucet and let you make the decision about what you think about me afterwards. And I think that's the key even to the question you're asking, which is the way you define your workaholism is ask the people around you. That's how you'll know. And we don't do that. I know men that are like, it's so hard. I work like 70, 80 hours a week. It's so hard. No, what's really hard is having that 8-minute conversation with your wife.
Yep.
And that's why you're avoiding it. If it wasn't that hard, then why wouldn't you just have it? Why wouldn't you have that 20-minute call a 20-minute conversation with your wife? I say it in ministry land all the time where it's like, I know plenty of men who fly 3,000 miles around the world to minister to strangers, but can't walk 30 feet across their own living room to minister to their own family. We've determined that if I'm a man really does determine that if I'm working hard, I'm doing it right. Yeah. But I would ask, which direction are you working? So we do this exercise a lot with men where I'm like, I want the 40-year plan. So we're going to do where you are, 40 years old, every 10 years. So we're going to go 10 years, 10 years, 10 years. So if you're 40, we're going to do 50, 60, 70, 80, and we're going to get you all the way towards that end of that life. Because a lot of the guys we work with, more in midlife right now. We're trying to get way younger. But the idea is right now we got some 30-year-old guys, and I'm going like, okay, map this out next 10 years. Who do you want to be in 10 years? Like, describe that person to me. Who do you want? No, not a single man. I'm describing who you want to be, not what you want to do, not what you want to build. Who do you want to be? Yeah. And when you get down to the brass tacks, because identity, I think maybe it was Nowen, or I don't remember who it was that said it specifically, but they said the immature form of identity is what I do, what I have, and what others think of me. So that's the immature form of identity. A true sense of identity is who are you really, what do you believe, and what do you value? What do I really believe? And that's like a scary place of honesty for most people. But, so what do I believe is the question, because you're going to reveal that by the man you want to become. So if I can get you to tell me who you want to become, then I can work backwards to get you to uncover what you really believe about yourself and your value. Because some men get stuck in going, well, I'm going to list all the things I'm going to do. No, we're not going to focus on who do you want to do, what we want to do. Who do you want to become? Yeah. Now, once we get that, then you go, what do you need today in order to become that person in 10 years? What do you need? What would you require in your life to become that? And we don't let men skirt anything. It's not like, well, I want to be a good dad. Well, who doesn't, man? Like, give me some details. Yeah. What does that even mean? Right. So I'm like, tell me what a good father looks like. What does a good father do? Well, he's patient. He's present. And they'll give me the list. And I'll go, okay, can you work 80 years and then define yourself as the good father you just described? Can you work 80 hours a week, 60 hours a week? Can you have all these things? No. Okay, so now what's the cost? If you can't, what's the cost?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you have to do a cost analysis, and you go like, what's the cost of becoming this? And is it that valuable to my family that I become these? And if so, how do we build the life we want, not the life we're told we're supposed to have? Because I guess this is what I would end it with in terms of that discussion, is I would go, the problem is that we've misdefined success for so long that men in business and in ministry and all over the planet, all over the place, in all varying degrees of society and financial stability and all the other stuff, right? Like, we have misdefined success for so long that nobody knows what they're shooting for anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I built the business, or I built the ministry, or I built the thing. Look how successful I am. And their marriages are crap. Like, their family doesn't know them. And I tell people this all the time, like, no, you're building an inheritance, not a legacy. Right. Those are two different things. And if you want a legacy, you have to live a legacy. If you want to leave a legacy, you have to live a legacy, which means if I'm going to build a $10 million plus business, $100 million plus business, a lot of the guys that were around, these guys are on trajectories to be billionaires. We've got guys all over the place that I'm sure like you're working with as well. And I'm like, that is awesome.
It is.
But if you leave the money, but you don't leave the ability to steward it, the lifestyle to steward it, which you have to live. You can't do that once you've earned it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that, you can't then by reverse osmosis give your family the tools to then steward that. You have to live it today. So when you leave it tomorrow, they know how to steward it. Or they will just squander it and you don't have legacy anymore. It just fell out the bottom of the bucket and you worked your entire life for it to be gone in one generation.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that is a tragedy.
It is. So in that process, how do you integrate faith and what God is saying to someone specifically about their identity or getting to that outcome? I'd be interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, we use a lot of different tools.
Yeah.
So this is what made us not fit into most of the church models anymore and asked to leave several times, which it's okay.
Yeah. Same.
But it's all right. I mean, because to me, I'm like, let me just, I don't compromise on Jesus as Lord. I don't compromise on the authority of Scripture. I don't compromise. I'm basically going to be like a Nicene Creed guy. That's going to be what I default to. And I'm okay with those. But how that plays out in my life, I'm going to utilize every tool created by God under the sun in order to do the work that I'm called and created to do.
Yeah.
That includes philosophy, psychology, and mythology. So we tell people like, we are going to utilize all the tools at our disposal. And for men, primarily, we use story. Story gives men we use story and poetry to give men a glimpse into their hearts, which is traditionally and tribally true for men. So men are usually accused of not having a good emotional IQ. That's not actually accurate. That's not true at all. They just go through a different doorway. They're not going through the feelings to get to the emotions. They're going through the actions to access the emotions. They need the story. They need the language that moves their heart. It's why men will be moved to tears during Braveheart, but feel like they can't connect to a worship song. So the reason is because men are primarily driven by action, not emotion. So we've got which I call the difference between devotion and emotion. So like women are primarily emotional beings. Thank God for that. I don't know why women hear this. They're like, well, no, I like action too. I'm like, I get it, okay? I'm not demeaning the feminine, but women are primarily emotion driven, empathy driven. Men are devotion driven. They are emotionally driven. And so in order to get men in the door, we use poetry and story. And so that's why the book I wrote about the journey to biblical masculinity is based around the story of Parzival and the quest for the Grail. It is a traditional story for men to see what it means to cross from boyhood to manhood. And what happens is, I've told this story around campfires for years now. This one, the Green Knight, the Listener. I have a list of stories. Even Jack and the Beanstalk, I tell it around campfires and men start sobbing because they're like, oh my God, I'm Jack. And I'm like, yeah, your inheritance was stolen when you were a kid because a giant killed your father and took what belongs to you. And all of a sudden men are like, why is this moving me? Because we found the doorway to your emotional response. We found who you really are.
Wow.
You're a little boy climbing a beanstalk who's trying to take back what was rightfully his. And you didn't know you were doing it because you were told you were violent. You were told you were toxic. You were told you were all these things that you are absolutely not.
Yeah.
And that doorway for men just looks different. And so story, poetry, we use a ton of poetry, which usually feels like the opposite of masculinity. But when you start reading things like David White and Robert Bly, and you start getting into some of these more narrative ways of connecting, men they lose it. They're like, that is exactly how I feel. That is exactly what it looks like for me. And so we use that as going, okay, that's an emotion. Great, that was a good emotion. So what are you feeling? So we help men name their emotion. We go, okay, this story did it. A personal story in your life, or you recognizing you have an unwanted behavior. Okay, great. Now what's the emotion? And then all of a sudden the emotion comes up and we go, okay, what is it? Let's name it. We're going to identify that emotion. Now, after we've identified it and connected it to something, then we're going to go, when was the first time you ever felt that? We call it following the thread. So tell me about the first time you remember feeling that emotion. And we try to keep it between the ages of 4 and 18. And all we're trying to do is go, let's get to the story.
Yeah.
Right.
Tell me the story of that moment. Now give me because if I can get you to just 5 seconds prior to that story, we just found who you really are.
Right.
Because that thing that's causing the trauma, the thing that's opened that wound, if I can just get you 5 seconds before that, I don't need 3 years.
Yeah.
Just if I can get who were you just prior to that, I can remind you of that today and bring you into that today.
Wow.
So that you're defined by the original intent of who you were meant to be and not by the wounds and triggers that have manifested since that got broken. And for men, like that is, I mean, we've watched this. We do the same thing with marriages. We do an entire marriage weekend called One Flesh Weekend. We do it in Napa, and we do we have some. I won't give it away because there are some surprises. But what we do is we do a lot of stuff where it's like we're not actually trying to talk about conflict resolution because conflict resolution doesn't work.
Right.
What I want to do over the course of a weekend with me and my wife is we want to reintroduce you to the person you married.
Yeah.
Because there is a person there that you're in love with. That's buried underneath all the conflict and all the conversations. But if I can show you that person again, if God can show you that person again, you'll fall in love all over again 100 times. Wow. And so we're trying to do that on an individual level. Let me reintroduce you to the design that you were created for, to who you were meant to be. And then if I can do that in your life and we can do it in a marriage, then all of a sudden my life takes on exponential growth because I'm not constantly questioning whether or not I'm doing it right or I'm in the right place because now I know. And now I'm unmovable. Like a man who knows this isn't tossed back and forth every time something doesn't go his way or the deal didn't go through or his wife's upset with him or the kids decide to rebel a little bit. They are unmovable and unshakable. They become pillars of their homes and their culture. And that's what we need men to be.
Wow. Do you ever find in that process, so you have the restoration of who they're originally designed to be, and then the incident that caused this false identity to form, do you ever find that healing needs to happen in that area too? Or is once they're reminded of who they are, they're good and they're a pillar?
Oh, dude, no. It's like basically we just opened up the train wreck, and it's like because the point is that like this is what we want. I love this. God bless the church. But this is like it's like I went through my one time and now I'm done. I never need it again. And it's like you revealed where Jesus was and now it's all over. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Like, you know what I mean? Like in so many ways, it's like it's easy. Like, okay, I'm going to give you the end of every single tool that wants to represent Jesus to you. Sure. I'm going to give you the end of it. All of you who want to do this who are watching. At the end of it, Jesus is going to hug you and tell you you're okay.
Yeah.
That's the end of the story. We know that. Yes. But we also know that here, and it is semi-beneficial to experience it in those moments.
Yeah.
But the greater question is not where Jesus is in those moments. It's actually where are you? Where are you in that moment? Because the reason you're struggling with it today is because you're still in that place.
Yeah.
The reason you've blown up so many relationships, so many conversations, so many business opportunities is because you're still 8 years old and representing yourself as an 8-year-old boy. You're still blowing up your life because you're there. And here's the problem. You never arrive. You never are done. Okay, if that's the case, I want you to show me a perfect father, a perfect husband, and a perfect Christian. Just show me those. And dude, I hope they have a book out because I will buy it. I will be the first one in line. I will sign up for the podcast. I will pay for one-on-one mentoring. I'm in. Give me the class, whatever you need. I'm paying for the coaching session. But the truth is, we are all works in progress. And we are never going to arrive. You're never going to have that wound healed. Ever. I'm really sorry. I know that people want to be like, and then it's done. No. In fact, we'll just do the preacher point, which is essentially the only thing Jesus keeps after he's resurrected is his scars. And he uses them to destroy doubt. The only man-made thing in heaven is the scars on Jesus' body. It would have been a better miracle. Would it not have been a better miracle if he raised from the grave and there were no scars? Yet that's what we're preaching to people. Come meet Jesus and have all your scars disappear. Right. That is the biggest load of BS I've ever heard in my whole life. Because it's not what Jesus himself does. He resurrects from the grave with his scars, walks up to Thomas, and Thomas is like, I won't believe. And Jesus doesn't point him to the empty grave, which is what we do. Right. Like, he's not like, well, Thomas, if you really want to believe, you should go see the empty grave.
Yeah.
Instead, he goes, look at my scars, which we're back to the honesty and vulnerability conversation. Yeah. If you want doubt about who you are meant to be, if you want doubt about who God is to be eradicated in your life, then you have to start being radically honest about the scars and the wounds you've experienced over your whole life, and then display them everywhere you go.
Yep.
Yeah, and that just reminds me of the scripture where Paul's like, I boast in my weaknesses. It's like, look at these scars, right?
That's it.
I love it. That's amazing.
Yeah, and we're just teaching men how to do that well.
Yeah.
Like, if I want you to steward your scars well, that's all I'm trying to get you to do. I'm not trying to get you to be perfect. I'm not trying to get you to have it all together or pretend you have it all together. But what I am trying to do is honor the scars, because your pain absolutely leads to your greatest promises. Everything you ever wanted is behind the things you fear the most and the things that have hurt you the most. Yeah. Everything. And it is always going to be that way.
So I'm hearing about the train wreck and the honest place, and I love the story of Jesus, how he came back and showed his hand. He actually let Thomas like stick his finger through his hand, you know, like it's the most painful thing that ever happened in my life. Just stick your finger right through it. And Thomas,
well, because what we're doing is we should be inviting people inside of our wounds.
Yes.
That's what we should be. We should be modeling that. Like, come into but how scary is that?
Terrifying.
Like, that's terrifying, because we're not experts there.
Yep.
It's the place we got hurt. It's the place we feel the least qualified. Is the place we are most able to bring healing to others, by saying, get inside the things that have hurt the most.
Yeah.
Come join me in there. And in there, we'll both receive healing together.
Mm-hmm. And we can't control what the other person is experiencing in the process. Right. It's hard.
I love that.
So when you're unpacking the train wrecks, what do you find are like the top lies that people believe? Because I think we get in conversations with clients and they're like, I don't think I can actually be this honest with God. Like, oh no, I can't say the F word with this train wreck.
Which we do on our calls quite often, and it's so fun. It triggers the religious people.
I'm like, man, your heart is saying the F word, so just say it. He's a big boy. He can take it. He crucified his son. I think he can handle the F word, you know?
I think he's all right with it. I think we're good.
So in journeying this with men, what do you find are the common lies that they're believing that keep them from unpacking the train wreck, or even feeling like they can?
It's very simple. Yeah. I'm not good and I'm not enough. Yep. That's it. Every time.
Yeah.
Every time. Every man I have ever met just wants to be good and just wants to be enough. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Yeah.
Like, if we see the biggest breakthroughs by reminding people of their deep, innate goodness. Mm-hmm. And when I can remind a man, like, because nobody really wants, like, I guess I'll say it this way, like, which is probably not correct, so we can clean it up later, or somebody else
clean it up later.
But for me, I'm like, really, most people don't want to be fixed, right? Like, they don't want to be fixed.
Yeah.
They just want to witness to their pain. That's all people want. Every person just is asking, do you see me? Mm-hmm. Do you see me? Like, people going up on Sundays trying to meet their pastors aren't trying to get their lives fixed. They're just saying, do you see me? Do you see me? Like, I don't perform well. Do you see me? Mm-hmm. I'm a mess. Do you see me? Mm-hmm. Am I enough? And am I good enough to be here? And then when we, on a Sunday, only present those who are most perfect, we auto-tune the shit out of everything, and we just put on click tracks for everything, and it's all so perfect. And then we get on stage and say, come as you are. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense to the person who's sitting in the room. Their life is a train wreck. You just played the most perfect song, hit every cue, hit it all correctly, and even your spontaneous parts were rehearsed.
Yes, of course.
They were spontaneous.
And every lighting cue and all. I love that. Dude, I love the show. I'm not, dude. Yeah. Just as the dude who's led under it, I'm like, this is freaking awesome. Yeah. Like, I'm not saying it's not cool. Yeah. I'm just saying it's not helpful, really.
Yes.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, like, you can't see me in a crowd of thousands. Mm-hmm. And I don't really want to disappear. I want to be witnessed.
Yeah.
I want somebody to look at me and tell me that in the midst of your darkest, most awful, horrific moments, thoughts, processes, responses, reactions, I see you, I witness you, and I want to call you good. Mm. I want to call you good. And the hard part is that, like, we just don't have space for that. Our buildings are too big. Our gatherings are too big. So people are now unwitnessed and unloved. So they don't feel good enough. Because we're telling them you can't lead worship until you've got all your ducks in a row and you present perfectly. I mean, I'll share this with you guys. We're going to do a podcast on it. But it's like, I literally had, at the end of the year, I posted like one post with me with a cigar. No big deal.
Uh-oh.
With a cigar. Yeah. I got three massive cancellations. Like, gigantic things canceled. And one of the groups I know and I'm very well aware of, we have a history together. And I'm like, dog, I know who I know who speaks on your stages and leads worship. They're doing all these things.
You've smoked a cigar with them, probably.
Damn straight I have. Like, the truth is I'm like, and the thing is, I've had a drink with them. I'm hanging out with them.
Right.
None of us are getting, P.S.
Yeah.
None of us are getting drunk. Nobody's smoking a cigar every day. Okay. And so, okay, let's just be real about this. But I'm telling you, then all of a sudden, so I just call them on it. I go like, hey dog, like 2 things that I know. Number 1, the guy who leads this thing essentially ran over his wife, lost his marriage, and got remarried 9 months later to a nice little young lady. Okay? So you train wrecked your family and just got remarried, not a big deal. And everybody else on your stage, we know tons of them, all do these things and other things that I know that nobody else knows because I hang out with these people.
Right.
And I smoke a cigar on social media and I'm canceled?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So,
Yeah.
okay, so then I asked it, because he's like, well, we just have to represent something. Okay, cool. I said, that's great. Let me ask you a question then. So if I didn't post it, but you knew that I did it, you would still have me? Yes. It's like, dog, I don't want any part of what you're doing. Not a part of it. Because here's why. You are promoting dysfunction and dishonesty at the highest levels.
Yeah.
You are literally telling me, if I fake it, you would have me. But if I'm authentic, I can't participate. And you want everybody else in the ministry to be real? That ain't gonna happen. You want everybody else in the system to be real? That's not gonna happen. You want the sinner to confess to you what they're really doing behind the scenes? Ain't gonna happen.
Yep.
Ain't gonna happen. Because if they told you what they were really thinking and what was really going on, you'd kick them out. But Jesus does not ask us to believe or behave before we belong. He lets us, he does it the exact opposite. He says, you belong. Not just, and some of us are like, no, he like lets them kind of be around. We are talking about main people, talking about primary dysfunctional people. The only I guess now we're on a tangent. I'd be like, dude, at the end of the day, like, who sinned worse, Paul or David? Or Saul or David?
Right.
The truth is, the only difference between Saul and David is that David was willing to humble himself before the Lord and admitted he did something wrong. Right. Saul's sin was actually not as bad. Like, he actually just didn't kill a few people that God wanted to have offed at the end of this thing. But he wouldn't repent for it and wouldn't be humble about it. So therefore, he lost his position. David, on the other side, was authentically him. He's literally declaring that verse that we love, God, renew in me a contrite spirit. Like all of these things that he's saying, I confess, do not depart from me. He's saying that in front of all of Israel.
Yeah.
And God goes, that's a man after my own heart.
Yeah.
That's who I love. That's what I want. Authenticity and responsibility, I'll take that every single day. And we're offering the exact opposite and wondering why these men and these families can't get the healing they need. Because they can't even get to square one, which we already said is honesty, authenticity, vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, and that's like in today's day and age, it's really funny. We talk about this because we work with a lot of people in their 40s and 50s as well. And they're all afraid of AI. It's like when the internet came out, right? They're like, Google, and it's like, this is just the next iteration of it. But it's like, okay, AI, like any of that stuff just reflects what's in someone's heart. You can use it for good or for evil. But in an AI generation, what you're saying is going to be the greatest currency. When we can have authenticity in relationship, when we can have authenticity, even in our conversations, like this is the first time we met each other, but we're having an authentic, real conversation about some deep stuff. And I'm like, obviously the campfire is going to be way deeper because you just go there deeper when you're in person.
Always.
But, if we can have authenticity be the currency, I think the next generation coming up, those guys you're trying to reach, those in their teens and 20s, they're looking for that. They're not looking for the polish anymore because it's not working. We're seeing the degradation of the polished and the religious front, and that's always going to be there because it's in people's hearts. But the currency of authenticity is the thing that is going to draw that next generation and draw the hearts of the men that you talk about, and really honestly the women, because they need authentic husbands and they need authentic relationships with their friends. Like that is the point, I believe, of where we're going is authenticity. So I love what you're talking about, this whole mechanism of how you get there, just invaluable.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Like there's so much that can be faked, you know what I mean? There's tons of deep faking in every sense of the word. You can write your sermons on AI now. You can write the songs on AI. We're going to have they're doing the art. Our AI's doing the art, doing the videos, doing all of it. But what you can't get rid of is interpersonal vulnerability. Yeah. Like life on life, like being around a real community and tribe, sitting around something as real as a campfire, sitting in a living room, having a real conversation cannot be replicated. That deep, we know that we have the research, right? Like the research is like when we're sitting in the room together, there is a certain frequency that begins to resonate in the room. We know this. It can be researched, it can be measured. There is a deep resonance that's required for me to feel safe and connected and secure. And that grounds me the same way when you take off your shoes, you go outside and walk in the grass. Like there's a grounding that happens that you can't fake. Yeah. And it requires us to be vulnerable with one another in the same room, in the same space. And this is all great. We love this. Like you were saying earlier, I love this. I love that I can meet you guys and we can connect. But the reality is, it's those that I'm sitting in the same room with, those men that I get around a campfire with, those people in my neighborhood and in our community, when we get around one another and we have that experience of vulnerability, which, you take a big psychological word like consciousness, it reveals the layer of consciousness we're operating in. Yeah. Because am I really being able to be me? Am I fully present, right? Like, am I fully aware of the moment I'm living in? Or am I just in denial? I'm just disconnected. I'm disassociated from my actual life because of a million different reasons that I don't want to deal with. But I'm starting to see it play out the deeper and deeper into connection I get. Because eventually, if you're in a relationship long enough, that stuff's coming out. And it's why most people run away from deep, intimate connection. And we need it, like you said, we need it with men. Women need it as well. And we all need it in different ways. Yeah. Because we need to be witnessed and seen and invited into our goodness.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, just want to honor your time because I know you said you got an appointment next year. Yeah. So how can people connect with you?
Best way, you can, on social media, just head to DJ Hamilton or This Is The Fight. Any of those, they're going to get you to what we're doing. Our thing is it starts free. So just come hang out at the fight. thisisthefight.com. Come see what we have to offer. If it's helpful to you as men, that's who we're shooting for. We're just helping you. The fight exists to train men how to fight, to reclaim their identity, discover their purpose, and master the art of finishing well. And that way they can be the husband that their wife desires, the father their children deserve, and the leader the world needs. And so we're really making sure that we provide the practical tools to do that. And so if you're just going to hang out on social media, awesome. Love to be able to inspire and motivate men to be able to do that. If you're looking for something a little deeper, just head to thisisthefight.com and you can jump into our platform for free and we'll just, we'll have some really great conversations. And there's a community of a couple hundred men on there now. And so we are targeting to be the largest online resource for men on the planet. That is what we're going after. Most comprehensive and exhaustive resource for men on the planet, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. We want to make sure we provide something well-rounded for men to get the tools they need. We're not looking to build we're not trying to fill arenas or stadiums. We're just trying to fill homes. And so we'll see how that works.
I think it's going to work great. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
And I just want to let you know you accomplished a goal Angela's had for a little while, and now we're going to be an explicit Christian podcast with saying shit. And...
Oh my gosh!
No,
it's so funny though. She's like, Greg, just let me cuss. I'm like, I don't want to cuss. Great. Oh, dude.
Yeah, I am that guy. I apologize.
For that, I was just like, maybe let's not have an explicit Christian podcast. And she's like, oh, you know what?
Dude, the great part is that me and my wife have had this discussion a lot. It gets me in a ton of trouble because at the end of the day, I'm like, if I'm going to share authentically, it's going to be colorful. Yeah. And it's at this point, I'm like, there's tons of options for you out there. I will point you to them if this is offensive to you.
Yes.
And that's what I tell them. I am looking for the dudes on the fringe who this language makes sense to them. And if it doesn't, that's totally okay. No harm, no foul. But I have to just be who I am. And I'm glad we could push right over the edge and we could jump off that ledge together. I appreciate that.
I love it. No, I appreciate that.
I've been on that ledge for a while. I'm like, it's good. There are some areas where life happens and the train wreck is there and you're unpacking it and it's like if you just say, oh, it was so great, it's like, no, that's not honest.
No,
just say it. And I feel like people need people saying it to just be like, oh, God still loves them and God still believes that they're good when they say it. Oh my. Yep.
At the end of the day, we've just done enough gatherings and stuff with men where I've watched this. I've watched it and go ahead and argue the reality of experience and I'm cool with that. And I'm not saying it's all correct. What I am saying is the moment we have a group of 20 dudes And they probably know me, see me somewhere. Swear word comes out, cigar gets lit up, and I've got like a tiny glass of whiskey. I now became the most trusted spiritual advisor in their life. Because what they realized is I know that I'm throwing away a reputation. This is the key for me. I'm throwing away my reputation for the cost of making sure you get to where you need to go. I don't care about my reputation. What I care about is the results and the fruit of a man's life being transformed. Because if I can get him in the door to know he's safe, he's going to take it back to his family, and it's going to transform everything. And I'm like, this is me taking whatever reputation and just tossing it out the window, because I know what I'm going after at this point, and everything else is irrelevant.
Well, and to Angela's point too, it's what people's hearts are saying anyways.
I know.
So just say the word
someone to be
instead
like,
of being religious and good.
Yeah, they need someone, like you said, who's willing to throw away the perfect image, or like, oh, if I don't smoke the cigar on social media, will you still invite me? Because their heart is like, oh no, if my pastor or my whatever finds out that I'm drinking a glass of wine, what does that mean for my volunteering and all my good behavior? It's chucked out, right? And it's like,
that's right.
What if we were just honest and drank the glass of wine, and you tell me about your train wreck, and then you tell me how shitty it was? Like,
that's right.
Train wreck is never like, wow, I walked out of that and that was great. I haven't heard anyone say that yet in all of our meetings.
And at the end of the day, hey, I'll be the first person in line to come back and be like, dog, that did not work. Like, I really messed up. Yeah. Like, I'll be the first one in. Like, I'm cool with that.
Totally.
I don't love Jesus any less. I don't believe any of the tenets of our faith any less. I just have to give the authentic expression that I have. I don't have anything else. And if I'm gonna ask men to do that, I can't present something else in the other direction. And it's why we do things the way we do. And I love the way you guys are presenting it, because I'm like, it is so healthy. It is so much healthier to do it this way. And then if you need to walk it backwards, you can walk it backwards. But like,
You're a person, right? You're a person.
I just am like, take it all the way. And I'll end with this story, because somebody told me this a while ago, and I'm like, this is the way I view it, is that there are so many people who see me in the church, and let's say we're on a ledge, you know? So if this is like the ledge, and they see me walking all the way to the ledge, right? And they think they're back here in their nice little safe comfort zones, right? And I'm walking all the way out to this ledge, and when I walk out to the ledge, their immediate thought is he's gonna jump off, or he's gonna fall. But what they don't see is the hundreds and thousands of people who are barely hanging on to the cliff. That if I don't go that far out, they have no one to reach down their arm and grab them and pull them back on. And I'll look like the crazy person. I will look like I'm losing my faith. I will look like I'm doing all the things that everybody wants to assume. But I am out here for the sole purpose of grabbing people who are barely hanging on. And I'm going to give my life and my reputation for it.
That is beautiful, and we love it. Thanks, man. Thanks for your authenticity
Thank you, guys.
in this conversation. And have an awesome lunch. This is great.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you really enjoyed this message. If anything resonated with you from today's podcast, we wanted to ask to see if you'd be willing to share it with a friend that you think would also benefit from it. We hope to see you again soon.